Good evening. Thank you for joining us for this very special NWHM sponsorship highlight with WarnerMedia, Equity and Inclusion on the topic of the next generation of women leadership. And happy Women's History Month. Throughout the month of March, the National Women's History Museum is paying tribute to the women on whose shoulders we stand, celebrating inspiring women's stories and encouraging all women to share and remember their own value. Author, diplomat, and trained mediator Shireen Dawson states that we want our girls to benefit from the courage and wisdom of the women before them. We have to share the stories. In that spirit, this evening's program takes a closer look at the next generation of women in WarnerMedia's Equity and Inclusion division. The discussion will identify what can be anticipated in the future from this new wave of executives and thought leaders, and will explore themes of inclusion and allyship among women and differences that are evident among their peers. The conversation will also consider the benefits of telling women's stories to shape the narratives of today's societal landscape. My name is Lori Ann Turgeson, and I serve as the Vice President of Education at the National Women's History Museum. For those of you who are with us for the first time, welcome. For those of you who have attended an NWHM program before, welcome back, and thank you for your continued support. All this month, our Women's History Month virtual programming has been generously underwritten by WarnerMedia. Before we begin, please allow me to go over a few housekeeping items. This presentation is being recorded and will be available on the museum's dedicated YouTube channel in the days following the event. Today's guests are available to answer your questions, so please use the chat feature for any comments that you have during the program, and use the Q&A feature on the tool ribbon at the bottom of your screen to ask any questions that you may have regarding the presentation. You may submit your questions at any time during the presentation. And now please join me in welcoming to the screen our moderator for this evening's conversation, Samantha Nara. Welcome, Samantha.
Thanks, Lori, and thanks for having us here. So excited to be here in partnership with the National Women's History Museum, and it feels like such an honor, the last day of Women's History Month, but we all know that it's always Women's History Day, year, whatever it is. So, so thrilled to be here. My name is Samantha Nara. I'm responsible for leading our inclusion strategy as it pertains to the stories we tell and who gets to tell them. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a South Asian woman with curly black hair wearing my favorite Wonder Woman t-shirt. But I really am so excited to introduce these amazing powerhouse women that I get to work with every day, who are driving equity and inclusion here at WarnerMedia, but more importantly, the industry at large. So I'd love to introduce to the screen Vanessa Pfeiffer, Diana Theobald, and Gabriela Navarro. Hi, ladies.
Hello.
Welcome to the party.
Hi.
Hello. So I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. I feel like this is an opportunity for us to just hang out first and foremost, because we don't get to do this enough. And I wish we were in person, and it's unfortunate that we're not, but hey, we get to tell the world what we're up to. So I'm really excited to be here with you all, and I'm gonna let you all go around and introduce yourself. And Vanessa, let's start with you.
Sure. Thanks, Samantha. And so thrilled to be here with all of you. I am Vanessa Pfeiffer. I'm a director on the Equity and Inclusion Programs team. Sorry, my mom's cat is loudly crying.
Right, no.
I am originally from Montreal, where I worked in independent film and television production. I had also a stint working for a record label and a management company. Have always loved working with talent. And when I moved here to Los Angeles, joined Warner Digital Networks under the Machinima and Fullscreen brands, working with gaming content creators before joining this team at the top of the pandemic. So it's been a winding road to get here, but I'm so glad to be here. So I'll just pass it over to Gabriela.
Hello, thanks, Vanessa. My name is Gabriela Navarro, and my pronouns are she, her, ella. And I started my career in the entertainment industry when I graduated college in 2009. I had always kind of had this vision to work in a space that promoted representation. But it wasn't until I had my stint in the nonprofit industry, working for a conservation nonprofit, where I really got my hands dirty in DEI work. And then after I like absorbed all of that kind of information and knowledge, I was like, oh my gosh, how amazing would it be to apply all this to the entertainment industry? And thankfully, Christy, Samantha, and like the super power, like, group that she put together to lead our division were in the kind of like beginning stages of putting together our equity and inclusion division at WarnerMedia. And I was able to kind of like hop in at a moment where they needed someone on the workforce and production strategy team. So that's where I sit now. So I will actually really quick before I pass it along, do y'all want to see who's behind me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure, I know. I want to see if I can name them all.
I learned that one from my colleague, Dwayne.
Dwayne's the best.
Yes.
That's going to lead to our first question, so get ready. But let's hear from Diana first.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Diana Theobald. I'm a director. I'm actually in Samantha's pillar, so she is my manager, and so this is really fun to do this with her. My background is actually in animation, though. I worked at Marvel Animation, I've worked at DreamWorks, I worked at Universal, and most recently I was working with Cartoon Network and Boomerang, and I was on the creative side. I became kind of into the D&I side of it, though, after I was in a rock climbing accident and became an amputee, and just through experiencing all the new fancy world of accessibility, realized that there was a lot of work to do with disability inclusion. And so I started by getting involved in my company's BRG, Turner at the time, the business resource group for people with disabilities. And through that, just kind of kept going from there, kept finding ways to inject D&I into my content work, and was very fortunate that I was able to join some of this team doing this across the enterprise.
Well, what she didn't say is I stole her. I stole her because she was doing things that I was like, oh, I need to steal that. This is the kind of stuff you steal, which is inclusion work, right? But this is stuff we can share and do best work. And Diana was doing great work, and across an industry that, honestly hasn't been, necessarily looked at in the same way as, some other mediums across the business. So it was very exciting, and love having her on my team, much like the other two lovely powerhouses on this call, on this, I guess, conference call, webinar, what do you call it now? Zoom.
Series of boxes.
Life. That's what I call
know.
it.
All right. So Gabriela, I'm going to start with you. And you'll start with the first question because you have your wonderful background and you have so many incredible women from the present and history. So the first question for each of you is, who's the woman that's influenced you the most? It can be from history, it can be from now. Tell me, like, who is the woman that has influenced you the most, or at least one woman that has influenced you?
Yes. She is not pictured in my background, but I mean, like, number one, obviously, I think my mom, but within a historical context, one of the people that I always like to reference is Frida Kahlo. She's a Mexican artist, and one of the things that comes to mind when I think of her is that I'm Mexican myself, I'm Mexican American, and being Mexican is such a beautiful gift. It's a beautiful culture. But we often only talk about the beautiful parts of our culture. We don't talk about the bad and ugly parts of the culture, like machismo and homophobia and transphobia. And here was this woman that came long before me, who was shining a spotlight through her art on very taboo topics that affect women. She was openly queer and proud of it. And I think that for me, knowing that she existed, it brings me a lot of comfort that I'm not alone in kind of the person that I've become, and that there was someone else much longer ago where it was even more of a taboo to be a queer Mexican woman. Yeah, so she's my, like, whenever I'm feeling down, I gotta think about Frida and look at her art. Yeah, I'll pass it on to Vanessa.
So this is such a difficult question. Well, I mean, I'm also in my mother's home, so I feel like if I don't reference my mother, but honestly, my mom has been, I can't even imagine what I would have turned out to be if she was not a constant and present influence in my life. So yes, shout out to my mother. But I also wanted to highlight, actually coming from my Canadian background, there was an amazing producer and film director, Kathleen Shannon, who had actually started, she was a high school dropout, went into film out of sheer, will and passion, and actually fought to set up something called Studio D at the National Film Board of Canada. That was a studio entirely dedicated to telling women's stories by women, for women, and all different kinds of women, like Indigenous women, Black women, Asian women. This was not it was not a white woman only studio, which I think if we got more into the weeds on that topic, I think we'd have a lot to say there. And she she was just so inspiring, and that she built that space for female creatives to really change the entire narrative around stories that were told, because I think we all have seen far too often just stories told about people, but not by them. Anyway, so that's somebody I wanted to shine a light on, that she may be little known, but yeah, you should all check her out.
Oh, I love that, Vanessa. That's awesome, and leads so much into the work you've chosen to do in this next iteration of your career, which is really exciting to see the connectivity. Diana, tell us.
Yes. Okay. Well, I also have to say my mom and my grandmother, but I want to say my mom and my grandmother because they're very strong people. My grandmother, especially. I mean, after she was divorced, then she went back to school and she got her MBA and she started trying to work in business. And it's so interesting because we're talking about women's history, seeing what has improved and throughout each of their lives and what challenges they had in each of their lives. Like my own mom wasn't able to open a credit account in her own name without having like her dad's cosign on it. And then meanwhile, like I'm here, I had no problem purchasing property by myself. So just seeing like what barriers have been removed for me that weren't in place for them. It's really fascinating. And I'm very grateful for all the work that they did bringing those barriers down. Historically, I do want to double down on the shout out for Frida Kahlo, because actually she did a lot of art about her body because she struggled with her body as well. And that was really comforting for me when I found out about it, because I think that doesn't get talked about as much, that she had physical problems, and the way she dealt with it through art is so inspiring to me. Also want to give a little shout out to Judy Human, who is still alive. She's still alive, and I got to meet her. And if anyone has seen Crip Camp on Netflix, which you should have by now, her energy, she was very pivotal in getting the ADA passed and just pushing forward disability rights. And when I saw Crip Camp, which shows her when she was young, like a 21-year-old camp counselor, I saw so much of myself, just this like very bossy, but getting everybody organized and together and just not giving up and just having extreme passion and pushing things forward. That was such good energy. And I want to lift that up and spread it around to everybody.
Diana, that's awesome. And I mean, I remember when you got to meet her, you came back and were telling me about it. It's just that ability to be able to connect with someone that has, really tried to bust down the walls of these built landscapes that, I think a lot of us talk about, because our goal is always systems change. This place, specifically the US, it's called the forefathers for a reason. It wasn't, it's not there weren't mothers in the room. There weren't women in the room when these systems were built, if you will. The thing that really excites me about the work that you all have done and that you continue to do, and I've learned so much from each one of you during the time that I've been here these last 2 years, and I couldn't be more thankful for that. And I think what's really, really interesting about it is this work has been around for centuries, right? There's people that have been activated and wanting to change things, but not having the voice. And I think, Diana, you made a really incredible point, which is that there have been people before us that have broken things down. And that is the positive of where we are today, that systems change is possible. And there's so many things that we can do. I would love to hear from you, Diana, and Vanessa and Gabriela. What are the things that you're most excited about right now? Because we work in an industry that has the ability to move conversations forward, move audiences through story. And Diana, you talked a little bit about it with another distribution channel's content, which is fine because we have tons over here too. But who are some of those characters or those or the qualities of those the characteristics, if you will, that you see of this generation and the next generation leaders that are going to be imperative for us to move forward? And I'll start with you, Vanessa.
I'd say that one of the things that's really inspired me the most is seeing this whole generation of female leaders who are unafraid to lead with empathy and kindness and compassion. And I was raised by a single mom who achieved a lot in her career, but it was a slog. And sometimes I felt like her generation felt like they had to adopt almost a male model in order to be successful. And now I'm seeing just this whole, again, this generation of new leadership. And it's not just coming from women. I think women have led that charge, but it's like, the rising tide lifts all boats, because now you see a lot of wonderful male leaders who are adopting those qualities as well, or who are just finally able to express themselves in that way. And all people are just able to really bring a new style of leadership. And I find that is changing the system. It's breaking the wheel, and that's super inspiring. So that's what I would say. Oh, you're on mute, Samantha.
I thought I would be able to get out of doing that just this once, I think something that you said was the leading with empathy, and the idea that, I know that when I first started in the business, I feel like such an old lady when I say in the business, but when I first started, it was interesting. It felt there was like a little bit of there can only be one mentality. And I feel that has shifted so greatly in just the short amount of time or long amount of time, whoever's counting, have been in this industry. And so I would love to hear anyone on the panel's perspective on that and what you've experienced and how you, again, see those trends shifting in other characteristics of leaders.
Diana, I'll go next. So really, I'll be real quick. I think one of the biggest trends, and I hope that it's not a trend, I hope that it's here to stay, is that the leaders that are emerging now are not willing to put up with performative culture or performative activism. The conversations that we have internally are always about how can we strategize this as a long-term ongoing commitment, rather than the days where we only spoke about issues that affect women on Women's History Month are long gone. We're talking about how to uplift women and how to showcase all of the contributions that we bring to the table year round. And I think that's part of, what Vanessa was speaking to a little bit with, having that empathy to say, like, wait a minute, this doesn't seem right. Like, why are we only speaking about issues that affect the Black community only in February? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And like that that just comes from like emotional intelligence. And that's something that like we definitely bring, you know, to the table. And it helps us come up with these strategies of like, how can we better serve our workforce, our consumers, and just, you know, globally, everybody that's affected by that, you know, is on the receiving end of our content and our product and our work.
I would add to that we're also looking outside of ourselves, I see as a trend. So it's not just about lifting up women, it's also who else is not at this table. Like, I like to think like I don't feel like we're fighting for a seat at the table as much. I feel like we're at the table, but we're looking around and we're seeing like there are people missing that need to be here. So it's a lot more about that intersectionalism, and bringing in the groups that you're not seeing there. Because I think back in the day, you could have a group of all white women and think this is progress, but now that's not diversity. That's not acceptable.
Well, I mean, I completely agree with you, and I look at what the future holds, and I hope to be a mother one day, and my kid's not going to be fully Indian, that's for sure. It's not going to check one box. So I look at it, you know, as like this: the future is different than the world we walked into, and it's going to continue to shift, and it's going to continue to change. And whatever systems we built, they have to be agile. Everything is going to continue evolving and changing. And if we don't build systems that allow for change in a way that, you know, continues to create, you know, those safe spaces and the ability for everyone to kind of move forward, you know, shame on us, right? There's so much that we can do that, you know, wasn't possible before. I think the other thing I wanted to talk about here is that, you know, you mentioned a little bit, Gabriela, about our strategy, but what's so interesting about our team is that I think there's one thing that I know that everyone is united around, which is this idea of impact and really being able to see the impact. And they know that it's the idea that it's not performative, right? And it's about systems change. But what's really cool is that a lot of the things that each one of you are working on are exactly that. So I would love for you to tell everybody kind of, you know, the charges that you're leading individually or with your teams, to just talk a little bit about that. Who wants to start? Okay, I'm going to call on somebody now. I'm going to pick on you, Diana. Let's go.
All right. I know it's hard because I'm like, oh, I want Gabby to talk about the thing that she did, and I want Vanessa to talk about the thing she did. But okay, what am I working on? Well, I mean, aside from like just being a pain in the butt about disability inclusion all the time, one thing I'm very passionate about is actually on-screen inclusion, character inclusion. And coming from animation, I'm able to have kind of a different perspective on this, because so often the character that you see on screen is not the same identity as the character who is voicing that character. And not even in like a bad way, just like, you know, like Ben 10, for example, is voiced by Tara Strong, who is a middle-aged white woman. Like, and if you're a child watching that, you just see Ben 10. You don't know who's voicing that. So I'm very passionate about measuring that and really seeing like, well, what is the impact of the diversity that we are putting on screen? Is it reaching audiences? Is it resonating with them? So very passionate about first like tracking that and measuring it, and just finding systems to make sure that it's not just checking a box. Is it a good story? Is it a good example of inclusion? So very passionate about that.
Well, I'm always so appreciative of it, because it also uncovers the opportunities that you talked about before, right? Which is like bringing people to the table. Same thing with characters, and same thing with stories that we're telling on screen. Is this? It's not about uncovering the negative all the time, right? It's about, there's opportunities here. We can bring more stories to the table, let other people see themselves in the content and be inspired by it because they see themselves, right? Gabriela, it would not be possible for us to finish this panel without you talking about the work that you've pushed forward. And cannot tell you how
How exciting.
thankful everyone on this team is for what you're doing there. You know, especially because not only is it the last day of Women's History Month, but it is also, you know, International Transgender Day of Visibility.
Yay.
Please tell us about what you've been up to.
Yes, and just a really quick thing about Diana. She's one of the things that makes her so awesome is that she's not only bringing light to the visible disabilities, but also invisible disabilities. We actually have a meeting, my first meeting with Diana next week about it. So I'm really looking forward to digging into that topic. But yeah, going back to International Transgender Day of Visibility, I have been very, very privileged to be involved in developing a set of what we call internally our gender affirming guidelines. So these are policies that are meant to guide our HR and managers through supporting an employee that might be going through a gender affirming transition within the workplace. And then also guiding, providing a venue for that person to be able to voice their needs, their concerns, their worries. And so that all of that work was done in partnership with GLAAD and other, taking from other partners that, really champion for transgender rights. I'm also super privileged that I've been a volunteer for the Trevor Project for almost 2 years now. I started like at the beginning of the pandemic. And so this cause is really close to my heart. I really feel like my heart and my soul is in the work. And it sounds strange to say that like your heart and soul is like in HR policies, but one of the things that happened recently is that because we're rolling out these policies and these resources, which include toolkits for allies, to list of resources to support our transgender non-binary employees. So we're rolling all of these out on a country by country basis because we are a global company. And so we always have to go through kind of like all this, very, very vigorous legal review before things are released in any specific country. And I think it was Monday or Tuesday, it was such a triumphant day for me personally, like on an individual level, because we got word from legal, like, hey, Canadian Council got back to us. We're able to roll these guidelines and policies out in Canada. And I'm like, yes, go Canada, like, thank you. And I was just like so happy all day. And then like the end of the day comes and I was just kind of, catching up on my social media and like the news and stuff. And I heard about the Don't Say Gay bill passing in Florida. And it was just like, it brought me so much heartache. It was such a bittersweet moment because I had put so much work into, kind of having not only developing the policies, developing the toolkits and the resources, and managing all the relationships and partnerships that comes with that work. But then also like on a more macro level, like there's so many things happening where this community is under attack and being targeted, and specifically children, which is even more, makes it even more heartbreaking. So I don't know, I feel like this work makes it so that like it almost feels like in our corner of the world, we can do just like our little bit, and that will push it just a little bit forward. And I think like that's the best we can ask of each other in these moments when there's, so many identities are being marginalized, is like, what can you do in your like own corner of the world? I was looking at the chat and there was someone who was in, I believe it looks like law enforcement. And she was one of the first Latina state troopers. That's so awesome. So it's like, that's what she's doing in her corner of the world. How can we champion for marginalized identities, people who have been systemically left out of the conversation, systemically oppressed and misrepresented. So that's that was kind of my bittersweet triumph this week.
Don't let it take away from the triumph, because Canada's bigger than Florida. So let's think about impact here. I know it's still in the corner of our country, but we got to think about, it's global, and we're going to keep going. And listen, there's countries where it's illegal, right? Like, when you think of, like, I think about over the years going to India time and time again, and knowing that it's illegal to be gay there, right? And then finally, and it's like, feels like literally 2 minutes ago, right, that it was legal. So we're fighting to create equity across the globe, right? It's different, the laws, right? So Vanessa, I want to give you a chance to answer, because I have a special affinity for all of the work that we get to do together, obviously, but also all the things that you push forward, and again, couldn't be more thankful. So
thanks. Yeah, I have just feel so grateful that I've been, given an opportunity to, I just, for context for those in the audience, I'm on a pipeline programs team. So our particular pillar focuses on creating creative talent development programs, shadowing opportunities, placement opportunities for historically underserved and underrepresented talent, to connect them with our business units and our brands and our content across the enterprise. So, I mean, just that is so unbelievably exciting and gratifying. And I, in particular, have really carved out a bit of a focus on animation, virtual production, and games, which are areas that I'm really passionate about, and also that I feel have kind of been left out of the conversation sometimes. And yet they are really the areas, to my mind, that of our business that they're growing so quickly. And the technology is evolving, and this is an opportunity to do what WarnerMedia has been doing. The strategy is to build equity and inclusion into the DNA of our business. And so when you're something like virtual production, where literally it's evolving, like there's a shortage of labor, of people who know how to bring this all together and understand the technology and work with the technology. And by creating these pipeline programs now, I mean, we really are building the next generation that is going to be more reflective of the world that we live in. And that's just, I couldn't be more excited about working on those initiatives. Yeah.
Well, yes, and right, like there's so much that you tackle in there, which is not just the intersectionality of the people that are coming in through these pipeline programs and what we're acknowledging, and what's going to be driving the next generation of stories. Like, just I mean, seeing some of the work that the people are creating and the stories they're telling is just, we haven't seen them on television before. And that's what you want to be doing, right? We're not trying to chase the last big thing. We're trying to find the next big thing. And the next superhero can be any color we want them to be. They can speak any language if they want, right? And I think the opportunities are just endless when you start really thinking about intersectionality, but not just intersectionality from how or the actual content of the stories, but also the technologies we're using, right? We're at the cornerstone of technology and storytelling, and being able to affect multiple industries. It's not just about entertainment at that point. We need engineers on this end. We need, designers. We need people who are artists, and people that are doing storyboards for, huge feature films can still go do storyboards for a Cartoonito show if you want, right? There's a way in which like people can be seen for many skills, and I think that really is the thing that excites me about this next generation. And like, people aren't really just going down one path, and inclusion means a lot of different things, and that's what's really exciting, I think, about this next generation, and this next generation of leaders we're getting to talk to. We have a couple of more minutes before we open it up to Q&A, so I'm gonna give you a really quick one to answer, which is, who is your favorite female WarnerMedia character or presenting female, depending if it's animation or live action, you never know. So I'm going to, who wants to start? Because I know Gabriella has an opinion.
I'm a nerd for this stuff. All right, so I thought long and hard about this last night, and I do think that our Scream queens do not get enough credit. And I'm gonna say that my favorite WarnerMedia female character is Lorraine Warren from the Conjuring universe. If you think about it, let me put this in perspective.
Okay.
She is constantly put into positions where she has to prove her gift. She's fighting the devil himself. And let's be honest, sometimes when you're a woman in the workforce, you feel like you're also fighting the devil. So it's Lorraine Warren, Conjuring universe all the way for me.
I love it.
James Wan knows how to write a strong female character.
You're
Shout
not
out
wrong.
to James Wan. I know he's not here today, but shout out to him anyway.
All right, Vanessa, who you got?
So I feel like I might get some pushback on this because it's not a positive female role model, but it's one of my favorite characters for a few reasons. So Selena Meyer on Veep is a horrible person. But I would love to put the argument out there that like we need complexity and nuance and so many different characters on so many different female characters, good ones, bad ones, in the middle. And she is and also I love Julie Louis-Dreyfus. So Veep, if you haven't watched it, please go watch it. You will laugh your ass off. And Selena Meyer is she's a real number. So
she's a national treasure.
She's a national
Louis-Dreyfus. And she's that character is one of I'm not gonna jump on too far on the bandwagon, but I think what's interesting about the idea of Selena Meyer is that you see her succeed in the way that many other people have failed upwards before us. And I don't know that as many women have had the opportunity to fail upwards